I'm Sean. Today I will talk about the glycolysis or the first step of cellular respiration, which starts with a single glucose molecule. Glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell, where ATP donates 2-phosphate to a glucose in a process called phosphorylation. Phosphorylation is when phosphate is added to a molecule. Glucose is broken into two 3-carbon molecule containing phosphate group that were donated by ATP molecule. Next, the phosphate group is removed from the 3-carbon molecules in a chemical reaction chain that produces 2 ATP from each molecules. But during the process of removing the phosphate group from the 3-carbon molecules, an electron is stored in a molecule called NADH. When NAD plus takes on an electron, it becomes NADH. The 3-carbon molecules at the end of glycolysis are known as pyruvate. Glycolysis, which is the first step of cellular respiration, doesn't acquire or require any oxygen, which means it's anaerobic, meaning without oxygen. So what do we end up with at the end of glycolysis? Glycolysis produces a net increases of 2 ATP and stores 2 electrons in 2 NADH molecules.
So, dito tayo sa names. Itself, tatlo ang pwede i-name dito. Bakit citric acid cycle? Because it refers to the first molecule that forms during the cycle's reaction citrate, or in its protonated form, citric acid. So, meron tayong citric acid kasi ayun yung na-produce after ng first process ng citric acid cycle. So, sa location, it happens in the matrix, still, specifically sa inner membrane ng mitochondria natin. So, in prokaryotes, ang cytoplasm lang ito. So, the citric acid cycle is a closed loop that lasts parts of the pathway forms. The molecule using the first step. So, kung ang glycolysis ay may 8 steps, ito ay may regulizes na 10 steps. Ayan. So, we have step 1. So, step 1, acetyl-CoA. Ang oxaloacetate, it's a 4-carbon molecule. So, ang acetyl-CoA natin ay dalawang carbon molecules siya. So, pag nagsama sila, we are going to meet the 6-carbon molecule. And we have a specific enzyme that will be citrate synthase because the product is citric acid. So, next, step 2. In step 2, we have a citrate na 6-carbon. It will be converted, again, it's to isomer. Ang tawag natin dito ay enzyme. Is our aconitase. So, citrate will become isocitrate. So, next, step 3. So, we have the isocitrate. What will happen is that will be oxidize. Pag sinabing oxidize, it will lose an electron. So, maglo-lose siya ng electron. It will transform into alpha-ketoglutarate. So, sa isocitrate ay 6 na yun. Si alpha-ketoglutarate, 5-carbon lang siya. So, ibig sabihin, may nawala tayong carbon dito sa step 3. So, ang enzyme natin ay isocitrate dehydrogenase. Since nagkaroon ng oxidation sa step na to, ibig sabihin, nawala na electron si isocitrate. So, saan napunta yung electron na yon? So, nakaabang si NAD plus doon. In order to get that electron, so magkakaroon tayo ng formation na NAD plus H. Aside from that, sabi natin, 5 na lang ang carbon molecule. So, ano nangyari sa isa? So, na-release siya as carbon dioxide. So, since times 2 ang process na ito, meron na tayong natanggal na dalawang carbon dioxide. So, in step 4, we have alpha-ketoglutarate. What will happen again? It will be oxidized na naman. I will oxidize and it will be turned into succinyl-CoA. So, this time, it is now a 4-carbon molecule. Si alpha-ketoglutarate kanina, 5. So, ngayon 4 na lang. So, siguro magkakaroon kayo ng nest kung saan mapupunta ang carbon na isa. So, it will become a carbon dioxide. So, the enzyme will be alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase. So, na-oxidize siya. So, ibig sabihin, nakapag-lose ng electron. So, NAD plus is there to get the electron again. Kukunin niyo yun. And then, form NADH and H plus. And it will take SH-CoA molecule as a reactant. So, yung succinyl natin, ayun yung carbon molecule na 4. Then, yung CoA, dahil din yun doon sa pumasok na reactant, si CoA enzyme. Kaya naging succinyl CoA. So, alpha-glutarate nakapag-oxidize and nakapag-produce ng carbon dioxide. So, next we have step 5. So, CoA of succinyl CoA will be replaced by phosphate group. So, mapapalitan iyon, which is then transferred to ATP and to make ADP to make ATP. So, in some cells, GTP or guanine diphosphate instead of ATP. So, same lang yung GTP and ATP. It's still a source of energy. So, 4 carbon molecule is produced succinyl kasi mawawala na si CoA kaya magiging phosphate group na siya. And in that phosphate group will be given to ADP. So, ito ang enzyme natin. Si succinyl CoA synthetase. So, in step 6, we have succinate is in step 6, succinate is then oxidized. Meaning, maglulus na naman siya to another 4 carbon molecule, fumarate, na reaction catalyzed by succinate dehydrogenase. So, ibig sabihin, maglulus siya ng electron. Meron na naman tayong electron carrier. So, this time, it will be FAD or FAD. So, it will be reduced to FADH2. Reduce it to because it receives an electron. So, si succinate ay magiging fumarate. So, in step 7, this reaction requires water. Okay, in our reaction, so si fumarate, magkakaroon ng reaction with water. And it will be converted into malate, which is catalyzed by the enzyme fumarase. Lastly, we have step 8. Malate is now oxidized. Again, nalus na naman siya na electron to oxaloacetate. Excuse me. Remember, oxaloacetate, that is the first acceptor of acetyl-CoA. Nire-regenerate natin siya. So, this is the starting for a carbon compound, which is going to be catalyzed by malate. Dehydrogenase is oxidized, so may nakaabang na NAD plus to get that electron again and forming into NADH and H plus. So that will be our step 8.
Good day everyone. Today we will talk about the electron transport system. So first, let's define what is mitochondria. So mitochondria is also known as the powerhouse of the cell. They produce most of the cell energy in the form of ATP or the adenosine triphosphate through cellular respiration. So, let's define what is the electron transport system. Ano nga ba yung electron transport system and ano yung connect niya sa mitochondria. So, the electron transport system, which is the final stage of the cellular respiration, is the process happen inside the mitochondria, the part of the cell that produces most of its energy. So, the electron transport system or ETS takes place in the inner membrane of the mitochondria. So, nagte-takes place daw or nangyayari daw yung electron transport system sa inner membrane mismo ng mitochondria. So, this is where the most of the cell's ATP or yung energy is being produced. So, in short, in these steps, yung cells natin, yung food natin, ginagawa niya or tiniturn out niya as the energy. Now, let's talk about the main process of electron transport system. Okay, first, NADH and FADH2 bring high energy electrons to the chain. These electrons pass through a series of protein complexes found in the inner membrane. In short, NADH and FADH2 are like delivery trucks na nagdi-deliver para silang mga yung mga delivery rider, ganun, nag-deliver sila ng mga high energy electron sa electron transport system, powering the production of ATP or yung energy of the cell. As the electron move, energy is released. This energy pumps hydrogen ions or H+ across the membrane, creating that we call a proton gradient. The gradient helps form ATP, the energy our cells use for everything. Okay, now let's move on to the importance of oxygen. Ano nga ba yung importance ng oxygen sa electron transport system? So, oxygen plays a very important role in this process. It acts as the final acceptor in the chain. Oxygens combine with hydrogen to form water. So, nagko-combine daw yung oxygen saka yung hydrogen para maka-form sila ng water or yung tinatawag nating H2O. Without oxygen, the whole chain stop and no ATP can be made. So, kung wala daw oxygen, titigil yung buong process ng electron transport system and walang ATP or energy na magagawa. Kaya mahalaga yung oxygen or essential talaga siya sa pag-produce ng energy ng ating katawan. So next, to summarize, the electron transport system is the most energy-producing stage of cellular respiration. It shows how our cell efficiently turn food into usable energy through ATP. And so, every time we breathe and eat, our mitochondria and electron transport system work together to keep us alive and full of energy. So, napakahalaga nung electron transport system sa ating katawan para magkaroon tayo para ma-turn out yung mga food na kinakain natin into energy and to keep us alive. What amazing about the electron transport system is how efficient and organized it is. It shows how our cells work like tiny machines using chemistry and electricity to keep us alive. It reminds us that even in the microscopic level, our bodies are full of systems working together to create energy and sustain life. That's all for my report about electron transport system.
Okay, chemiosmosis. Okay, what is it? This is the process by which ATP is produced using energy of a proton gradient across a membrane. So it occurs in the mitochondria during cellular respiration and in the chloroplast during photosynthesis. And its function is to generate ATP, the cell's main energy currency, by using the movement of protons down their electrochemical gradient through the enzyme ATP synthesis synthase. So for its input, there are four things: produce high energy electrons from NADH or FADH2 in respiration or from light in photosynthesis, and ATP plus PI in organic phosphate, and oxygen in respiration or light energy in photosynthesis. Membrane, mitochondrial inner membrane or thylakoid membrane. For its process, electron transport chain forms proton and across the membrane, creating a proton gradient. It's high H concentration on one side. This also creates potential energy known as the proton motive force. Proton flows back across the membrane through ATP synthase. And for its last process is the energy release by its flow drives the synthesis of ATP from ADP and PI. For its output is ATP, which is the main product, and also water. So in cellular respiration, when oxygen combines with electron in H, so water is output niya. For its main key point is like chemiosmosis links that electron transport chain to ATP, converting energy stored in proton gradient into chemical energy. So basically, ATP yung So change ko tayo, quick overview para matapos na to. So chemiosmosis, ito talaga, okay, this is a process where cells use movement of protons per AH across the membrane to produce ATP or energy. So pwede siyang isipin na yung cell ay siya nag-build up ng protons sa isang side ng membrane. Then when the protons flows back to a through a special enzyme called ATP synthase. So as they flow back, that enzyme uses the energy to make ATP. So in short, chemiosmosis, our cells use a proton gradient to produce ATP. So kung, let's say, using a scenario, kung magkatabi doon. Oh my god. Kunyari, sa dam system, kunyari ba, let's say, sa membrane, the membrane separates proton. So dito, sa dam, the dam separates water levels. Since, so as the water builds up on one side, or like potential energy, makakompare natin siya sa chemiosmosis, yung protons na nag-build up. So kunyari, it's the first process na, nag-build up siya on one side of the membrane, proton gradient. So, di ba, as water flows through a turbine, the turbine spins and makes electricity. So parang ganun sa chemiosmosis, proton flows through ATP synthase. So itong ATP na to, umiikot siya and makes energy. So, nagets nyo ba? So like, there's a system behind it.